Paradigm Shift,
an educational comedy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to yet another edition of Paradigm Shift, an educational comedy. I'm Dave Kelso, and we have with us today Alistair Ross, the creator of the increasingly ever popular documentary called Back to the BBS, The Return to Online. And as Jason Scott once said, and he's the one who made the very first BBS documentary in the history of ever toured the country and all that stuff, when he was asked, you hope that you've made the world's best BBS documentary? And he says, no, I hope I've made the world's worst BBS documentary because I would like people to do a lot better than I did in future documentaries. Well, I think for the moment, you do hold the record for the best BBS documentary in the world currently.
I'm not so sure about that, but
it's not only, because you're not only talking about how things were, but you're also talking about how things are, because it's seeing as the powers that be have been nice enough to launch out tyrannies like censorship and algorithmic free and all that. It's created a resurgence within the BBS scene, and I've been seeing all these cool new technologies that are coming out, including BBS softwares made in Node.js. Like, who would have ever seen that one coming, right? And things have just been getting better and better. I'm even seeing some BBS software supporting file downloads through internally created BitTorrent, links and like all sorts of things. It's really great.
It is. It's a really great thing. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh no, go ahead. I can wait.
I think that's the thing which I noticed. So I had, like so many, had long since forgotten bulletin boards, right? I was a BBS sysop back when I was a teenager, and I'd kind of forgotten about it all. And every now and again, at the back of my mind, someone would say to me, "Oh, I had such good fun when I was on bulletin boards. I've not got that same feel at all on the last time I had sort of similar feeling was when I was at college, when I was probably still a teenager, 19 or 20. And I would go on MIRC, right? And we'd be chatting in IRC channels. But that kind of thing went away, and I've never really had that kind of sense of camaraderie with complete strangers ever since those days on the internet. And I'm not to say that doesn't happen on the internet, but it happens in pockets which are probably, catered for by, large corporations and so forth. And so I did. I looked around for a while. It wasn't very heavily, and I think somewhere along the line, I knew that there was an existence of the Telnet BBS, basically taking a bulletin board system that used to be a dial-up thing, which had long since gone the way of the dodo, and then put that on the internet. And then I found the Telnet BBS guide, started hopping onto some of these BBSs which had been moved online, and found the experience almost exactly the same. But what was also incredible to me, what was most important, was that the people on these bulletin boards were there for the same reason as me. They'd become disenchanted with the Web 2.0 or whatever you want to call the internet of today. We had all this homogenized crap, it was owned by Facebook, Google, Twitter, and a few other big names. And really, when you go on the internet these days, you go on to do things like shopping, banking, your email, and, go and surf social media. But, it's very tracked. These are the things you generally do, and there's not that much outside of that unless you're doing sort of research and so forth. Whereas on the bulletin board, you really got up to any sort of old hijinks, and it really was just a great old time. And yeah, I found that almost immediately going back on these bulletin boards. It was such a great time.
What year did you first get into BDSing, and then what year did you exit stage left?
Oh, I won't be accurate with the years, but I think that roughly speaking, I would say that I probably got into bulletin boards around about 94 95, something in that region. So it's probably quite late to the game. But yeah,
I started a BBS in 1994 actually. I really accelerated. It only took me less than a year from being a newbie to IBM PCs, knowing less than nothing, and looking at this DOS command prompt and thinking to myself, how in the hell am I ever going to learn any of this shit, to being competent enough to like start my own BBS. I really accelerated with it because I was really enjoying myself. Plus, I mean, I was 16 at the time. Now, for about the last 5 years prior, I had this friend who was into BBSing. He started when he was like 10. So I'd be talking to him on the phone, and I'd be hearing all these tales about this magical world. Imagination. That he was engaged in. And I was like, what is this? He's reading stuff. It's not books. It's something from some computer somewhere, and BBSs and the internet.
I'm going to do an internet. Well, I'm going to do a book. Oh.
And all, like, what is all this? And then he'd play these songs called mod files. Oh my god, they were so cool. These mod, like, wow, magic, So he really inspired me to get into it. I started first running Renegade BBS software. Then I went to Teleguard. Then I went to Mystic for Windows, and then I went to man, it's like it's hard to keep track. Like, I did this switch back and forth between Mystic and Synchronet, because I've run Mystic for Windows, I've run Mystic for Linux, I've run Synchronet for Windows, and I've run Synchronet for Linux, and I eventually took my BBS down in 2010. And the main reason that I took it down is, kind of like what you were illustrating. The BBS scene had become not what I signed up for originally, because what I signed up for originally was the camaraderie and the community and the creativity, and it was just amazing to see, like, there could be this technology and you're doing this and that, and then someone says, I think we need to make it do this, and then there's all these discussions, and then people just start doing it. They start creating new software, they start creating mod packs, all these different add-ons for things, and there was this creative flow. And now, don't get me wrong, it wasn't a perfect utopia or anything. There were people who didn't like me, there were people I didn't like, there were flame wars. FidoNet is spelled wrong, it should be FIGHT-O-net, I mean, so it wasn't a perfect utopia or anything, but there was that community spirit. And when I started to drop out, is like one day I woke up and I said, why am I still running this thing? Because it wasn't doing what I originally signed up for. It's like, why am I putting my time and all this stuff into it when the community that I had fell in love with was very diminished. At that particular time, and this is my opinion, others may have different experiences, people can agree, disagree, whatever, but from my perspective, there was too much egotism and much less community. Now it was all about, look at me, look at me, look at me. Oh, we gonna do any community projects? Fuck you, you're not elite enough. Wait, what? And, like, the community was gone. The community had pretty well imploded, and it was all kind of penis measuring contests. I've got this mod. I made these new ANSIs. Like the community was just... And calls to all the BBSs started getting less and less and less. So then that led to even more, back and forth. Oh, my BBS is getting more callers than your BBS. We're in a diminishing BBS scene, but look at me. I've still got this much user activity, So I was just like, I'm out. I'm done.
Yeah. I think in Europe as well, it had changed. The paradigm had changed quite quickly because what was the case is not in the US. In the US, you could phone BBSs fairly toll free, and in that time you'd have you probably have to pay a subscription to an internet service provider, and your cost of call to an internet service provider might not be free as well. Whereas a bulletin board, you didn't usually pay for a bulletin board access, and you probably had a free phone call if you're in the same local area. But in Europe, especially in the UK where I was, no calls were free, and there was a monopoly on the telco there. Yeah, so when low call rates or free call rates to internet service providers started to come up, and they also had no subscription service. I think the first provider that offered that was part of a retail store chain, and it was called FreeServe. I remember that very distinctly because you could just go into the store, pick up a CD for free, and then get onto this 0800 free call dial-up, and you'd be on the internet. And as soon as I didn't have to pay for bulletin boards anymore, I could go online and find files on FTP sites. So this was all around sort of 97, I think, 97, 98. Yeah, once that came along.
It was similar, but different for me. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that I'm in Chicago. This is where the BBS scene was born. I've literally spoken with Ward Christensen before. Like, this is BBS scene HQ up in here. And if you didn't know somebody, you knew somebody who did. It was almost like an extended family, right? So here, we've got, the greater Chicagoland area. So you've got all these different area codes. And so, similarly but different, obviously, you had to pay no matter what. We had a certain area around us where it was free, up to, I forgot if it was 5 miles or 7 miles or whatever it was. Now, beyond that, it started becoming pay. And the further out you went, the more you had to pay. So there were several solutions that various companies came up with. There was something called, I think it was called Net Zero. You may or may not have heard of that over there. This was really an American thing, but it wouldn't have surprised me if you guys heard of it because people talked about it, And what Net Zero was it was a dial-up internet connection to where it was completely free, but there was an ad banner down below on your screen that would, flip, ads back and forth. So yeah, now you could override the long distance bill by getting on Net Zero, loading up your Telnet clients, and, off you go. So you could do things like that. And eventually there was what was called the 1010 services. So, normally in the United States, you dial 1, then a 3-digit area code, and then a 7-digit number. Well, there was these like weird prefix codes that they made that were like 1010-432 or, something like that, to where you would dial that, and then, you would dial in the number, and this gave you a competitive rates. It would still charge per minute, but it would be a hell of a lot less than what your main long distance provider was charging. So there were all sorts of workarounds. And then another thing that kind of brings back memories, it's semi related. Somebody set up something called Pilgrim Telephone. It was more of a joke than anything. I don't know if it still exists. I don't know who set it up. But there were 2 access numbers, 1-800-ATT and 1-800-MCI. Were the 2 access numbers to it. And for people who don't know, AT&T and MCI are /were telecommunications companies, here in the United States. So when you would call it, you would use this number to collect calls, right? Now, of course, the amount per minute was like some overly inflated thing, like $6 a minute or something. Again, this is part of why it's a joke. And normally when you make a call to someone, you put in the number and they're like, please wait while we connect your call. And you're just kind of waiting. And then the system either tells you that it was accepted and it connects, or it was rejected and it didn't. But otherwise, you're just sitting there waiting. Well, with Pilgrim Telephone, you could hear everything on the other end. Now, normally, it's like, collect call from and the name, and there was a limit to how much you could say.
Operator, I'd like to make a collect call, please. First name Bob, Last name is We Oughta Baby Pizza Boy.
Hello?
Collect call for Mr. Bob. We oughta baby eats a boy.
Sorry, wrong number.
Who's that, dear?
Bob, they had a baby. It's a boy.
Oh.
Well, with Pilgrim Telephone, there was no limit. So you could say, F you, like you could rattle on some crap for like a minute long, and then it lets you listen to it. So you dial it and you hear them pick up. Hello, you have a Pilgrim Telephone. Collect call from, you son of a, and then you could hear their reactions and everything like that. I don't know if it still exists or not, and I have no idea who made that. But that's definitely an American thing. That's, it's not probably not something anybody in Europe or anywhere else would use. But yeah, so like the BBS scene never really died, but it went down to a trickle. And now, because of everybody, getting sick of all the things you mentioned, it's starting to become developed again, and there's a resurgence. How familiar are you with fully decentralized technology? And I'm not just talking about blockchain. Yes, that's one of the many forms, but it's not the end-all, be-all. But in general, how familiar are you with the concept of the fully decentralized networking? And what that's about?
Yeah, I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I certainly have a reasonable awareness of it. Yeah.
Yeah, what I would love to see, and some people nickname this Web 3.0. What I would love to see is that sort of technology starting to become more integrated into BBS scene technology. One thing I could think of as a hypothetical example: let's imagine that you created an echo mail format based in fully decentralized technology. For lack of a better way of saying it, and doing my best to simplify it, what this basically creates is essentially an infinite hard drive. So basically all the different nodes on the network are acting as a part of this collective drive. And so basically each of these nodes has mirrors of all of the data. So when somebody goes to connect to a network location, instead of connecting to one single point, you've got all these different peers, just similar to BitTorrent, and it's then, pulling down the information. Not only does that make it impossible to attack and take it down from a central location, because it's not centralized, but similarly to BitTorrent, you've also got the bandwidth upgrade advantages to where you're pulling from all these different peers at once. So, you're getting, more throughput on that. I think it would be interesting to have this sort of an echo mail network of networks, so to speak, to where you can take existing echo mail networks and join this overall larger fully decentralized network that would not only act as a more efficient way for BBSs to communicate with echo mail, but could even be a retroactive archive. Like, I know that, on hard drives in various places here, I've got, my original data files with all the message bases from the networks and things like that. Imagine if those could be imported, retroactively dated, and whatever of that sort of stuff is surviving, it could kind of be the archive.org of echo mail in, a Web 3.0 sort of way. And I think that things like that would be really cool with the right talent and, people interested. I don't think that sort of thing would be too hard to create. I mean, you could make a basic form of it and then branch out from there and brainstorm and have ideas and just kind of expand out. But that's kind of one of the things, like you would think that more of this sort of technology would be getting utilized as interest is getting, rekindled in the BBS scene. But I've not really heard anybody mention it or doing anything with it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's projects I don't know about. You tell me.
So the reason I called the documentary that I made "The Return to Being Online" was because of two reasons. One, I was seeing a resurgence, as we've talked about, of people coming back to the bulletin board, back to the BBS, and it was quite clear that they were so disenchanted. A lot of people were so disenchanted with surfing the web in the current way it is right now. But I also talked quite a bit about and had interviewed a lot of people about what they were doing in the mod kind of area. And there was a lot of people who were, already branching out and using technology which is not just on bulletin boards, but also on the internet as well, and basically merging those capabilities. So, some of the early examples which I showed or demoed on one of the episodes of Back to the BBS was people using internet-facing public API. And they were using it for all sorts of purposes. So, for example, there was, right at the beginning of the coronavirus...
Brought to you by Pfizer.
There's the Dave Hopkins Institute, I think, or something like that was showing all of the results of, hospitalizations and deaths, unfortunately, due to the COVID virus.
Brought to you by Pfizer.
Worldwide. And what some of, I think it was Phenom Productions that had done it, basically interfaced with API on an Amiga that was connected to the internet, pulled down the relevant details in JSON form, and then reformatted that data to be then displayed in an ANSI text file for the BBS users. So that was one very early example. I actually went on and made...
I've seen like cryptocurrency stats.
Yep. So that's what I went on to do myself. I went on and made a mod for Mystic, which basically pulled cryptocurrency details down and, said, well, here's the market and so forth, the top 10 cryptocurrencies. And, there's a few things you could do with that. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of enhancements that could be made by pulling down that information and presenting it in a way which is useful. And, I think if there's enough people who rally behind one particular thing that they want to see, if it gets talked about enough on the echoes, then it will probably at some point turn up. And I guess it's all about what the demand is and how difficult it is to actually make. The good thing about APIs is that you can relatively easy download information. So I mean, I even made a few shell scripts the other day with ChatGPT and interfaced the GPT-3 API, and doing that from a Unix shell is very, very straightforward.
Hello, I'm a Mac.
And I'm a PC.
Hey, PC, check out my cool photo library application.
Neato. Hey, have you seen what I can do with this snazzy Excel macro?
It's pretty tight. Timing while I do my desktop search.
Very speedy.
Pretty cool, huh?
Look what I can do with this multiple desktop thing now.
Oh, that's nice.
Hey, fellas.
Hey there, Linux.
What are you looking at?
Nothing.
Are you running Linux?
No. Linux.
Looks like you're running Linux.
No.
You sure?
No.
Yeah, maybe. Yes, I'm running Linux.
Not me.
It's okay, Mac. We're all friends here.
I couldn't help myself.
Feels good to admit it.
So
then it's just a matter of integrating that with.
I have a question. I have a question about ChatGPT. Sorry. From what others have told me, because I haven't really screwed with it myself. From what others have told me, the interface required them to like put in their cell phone number. How do you get around that for a shell console interface sort of thing? How do you use Chat GPT without having to give the thing your cell number?
I'm not aware if you need to supply it your cell phone number.
Really? I heard from several people that in order to use it, it like asked for their cell number first, which I kind of found to be weird.
Yeah, so I think if you want to use ChatGPT, as in use the web client, then you have to sign up for an account with OpenAI, and it's possible that you have to. I can't remember what the requirements were when you sign up for a ChatGPT account or an OpenAI account, and it's possible, like everything else in the world, you have to give away your right arm in order to sign up, and so the requirement of having a cell number is possibly in there. I can't remember. You definitely have to give them your email address and a password and all that sort of stuff. But what I'm talking about is effectively using the back end, not using the Chat GPT front end, which is web based. I'm talking about using the GPT-3 API. And so you do need to have an OpenAI account for that, and there is a cost involved in that. It's not very much. But so for DALL-E queries, for example, I made a little script that basically pulled you sent it a query and said, hey, make me an imaginary image of a dog climbing up a tree or something, and it pulled it down in JPEG format, and then I converted it on the fly to an ASCII. So you've got an ASCII art of this dog going up a tree, and that query cost something like 5 cents or 6 cents or something like that. So it's out there, and I can see the opportunity for how much this is going to go, and I can see the future. How useful this is going to be. But obviously, if you're on the receiving end of this, say on a BBS, you would have an interface, and you'd be calling the API that somebody else has already signed up to be on. And it's just like the open weather API, for example. Somebody else has got the API key, so you're using it on somebody else's account.
So like somebody's paying for like unlimited queries, so they're not getting jacked 2 cents at a time, and then they just make theirs open to whoever they want to open it up to, whether it's members of their BBS or what have you. So
the way I see that going is, if I was to do that with mine, there is obviously a cost. So what I would do, I would say, well, if you're a trusted member of my bulletin board, then you could get in, but you have to have a security level of 100 or 50 or something like that. So you're known to the SysOps, so then you can go off and use this functionality.
Now, isn't there pay this for unlimited queries? Like, isn't there like an unlimited queries package?
I don't know is the answer. I'd have to quickly Google it and see, to be honest with you. I don't know is the answer right off the top of my head.
Oh, okay. Because all this stuff is pretty interesting. So it's like, if somebody had like an unlimited package to where it wasn't going to cost them with all their BBS members using it, then you wouldn't even need to have it at like a trusted user level or anything like that, as long as you weren't paying per query. As long as there was like a flat rate unlimited, then it's like, who cares how many queries my users make, because it's flat rate unlimited. So that's kind of like what I was thinking.
There's a new thing called ChatGPT Plus, which has literally just been out for like a week. And it's only available in the United States. I think it's coming globally soon. That's $20 US a month. And I think you get, so at the moment, basically ChatGPT, so not all the other things like DALL-E and so forth, but just ChatGPT is available for free, but if it's peak time or something that's not reliable, so it could go down, and if you're one of the free people, then you just don't get access to it. So ChatGPT Plus, that gives you general access during peak times, faster response times, and priority access to all of the new features and functionality that it comes out with. So yeah, it's pretty good. But I think right now what OpenAI are doing with ChatGPT is essentially what they call a research preview. It's not a full-blown system yet, but it's everybody's using it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I haven't directly used it, but I've watched video after video about it. I've got friends who have used it. Like, when you're even remotely into computers at all, it's hard not to hear about these things, because the gossip just kind of gets everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, this is going wildly away from bulletin boards, of course, but my opinion is that
BBSs can use it if the front end is
absolutely can. Absolutely can, and I think they will be benefited from it. I don't have any doubts about that. But I think overall, it's very, very little to do with the fact if you're interested in AI or IT or anything like that. Fundamentally, AI, whether it's OpenAI or Bard through Google or something else that we don't know the name of in the future, is fundamentally going to change the way that we work and live. And this has been seen before. When we go back 200 years, we look at the beginning of the industrial age, right? We saw that cars and factories and economies of scale. Then we went into
the printing press, for that matter.
Exactly, right. So then we went into the information age. Things really sped up when we started using computers, and that was, arguably you could say, well, that was the 50s and 60s, or maybe it was when they came to the office and the home, and that was the 80s, right? But then we've moved so quickly out of an industrial age into an information age, and now we're just on the cusp of entering what we call the knowledge age. And I firmly believe that what we do in our jobs, our everyday lives, we'll eventually take the information for granted. We don't have to have that information ourselves. The knowledge will be provided by the machine, and we'll be simply querying the system which has all the knowledge to get the answers that we need. But the interesting thing is going to be that we need to be better at understanding the prompts to give that system. And the old adage of garbage in, garbage out will never be more true in this particular age. So the people who are going to be ahead of the bell curve are the people who understand well how to prompt the AI. And if you do know how to prompt the AI well, then you're going to be quids in, basically, at this time. So I think it's very important for people to get into a level of understanding. And the thing is, if you're frightened about this, you're going to miss out, because it's something that we cannot get away from. That it's out of the hat already. It literally, Pandora's box has been opened. You can't stuff it back in. There's no going back. So we have to embrace it whether we like it or not. That's really the case that I believe that we're in.
Yeah. Or if not embrace, at least accept that it is there. Kind of like you accept that fire burns, and when you accept it, you know that you can cook your food with it, but touching it is not really the greatest idea. Whereas if you're not informed about fire and you don't know whether it's hot, cold, or what it is, and you think you can go putting your hand in there, you're going to be in for kind of a nasty surprise when you do, because you don't know what you're dealing with in that way.
Yeah.
But getting more to like decentralization technology, I really think that for the internet to survive in any sort of way where we're not having shall we say, aristocrats telling us what we need to be thinking and feeling and doing, and to be able to express as individuals without being penalized. A decentralized internet is going to be the key to that, because if you're going through a centralized source, well, not only is that a point of attack, that's a point of control, to where if you have to go through here, it's like, oh, you can only go through here if you think and say and do and feel, everything that whoever's up at the top wants you to. And if you have any opinions that have not been officially authorized by the oligarchs, whatever, then you're going to hit a roadblock. Or even scarier, like a social credit score like they have in China, where you've got good boy points and bad boy points, and you end up restricted from things like taking public transportation, or et cetera and so on. That's kind of a big problem in China right now, and we don't really need to be having that here.
Well, I think the ideal is wonderful, to have a fully decentralized internet, and I think it is a possibility. But what it does require is a heck of a lot of concerted effort on the account of the people, the masses, the yous and me's, and everybody else out there, and not the conglomerates, not the Googles and so forth, the for-profits.
Oh yeah,
and you can get very psychological about all of this sort of stuff and say, oh yeah, well, this is a capitalist v whatever kind of argument. But I don't think so. But the thing is that the technology will have to be made and have to be operated by the likes of you and me on a daily basis. So we will all partake in being nodes of the general infrastructure of the internet, which puts the responsibility back onto us. Now, I mean, the problem with the human beings, all of us, is that some of us can be trusted and some of us can't. And so, what is the lesser of the two evils? Is it the people who are operating strange or scrupulous nodes on the internet that we are supposed to trust as if they were just normal nodes, or do we trust the corporations more? And it's a difficult argument to talk about, because you simply don't know what sort of future that could look like with a totally decentralized internet. So I'm very very curious to see how it all pans out. But the technology has got to be written by somebody who is fundamentally not looking to make it for profit. The internet started out as a not-for-profit, and it worked well for that period of time. And then some organizations, well, a lot, pretty much everybody, got into it and then turned it into a for-profit. So how long before something like that happens from a fully decentralized system? Because we're just having the same conversation again. I mean, the whole point of DARPA, if you remember, before the internet, it was the defense, the US military, the defense network, basically was created to be, in the event of a nuclear war or something like that, what was going to happen is if they dropped the bomb over here, well, the rest of the network could still work, because there was, lots of redundancy. Well, it's not an entirely different technology is different, but the fundamental underpinnings of it are not completely different to what we're trying to achieve with this decentralized network. So very, very interesting. And I don't know if there's a mature enough technology out there yet that compensates for the greed of some organizations, or most organizations.
I think I can answer that one in two parts. Part one, the answer is yes. There's actually a lot of different technologies out there being developed by regular people, very good decentralized technologies. But part two is they are not as developed as they need to be yet. I'd call it a really good start. Take for example, and I'm mostly on alt tech platforms. I don't even bother with YouTube because of all the algorithm stuff, but I'm on Odyssey, and your channel is synced to Odyssey as well. And Al's Odyssey channel needs some more love. So listen, everybody watching me on Odyssey and BitChute and all these other places, go to Odyssey and give Al's Geek Lab some more love, okay? With that said, Odyssey is nothing more than a web front-end application to a decentralized backend, which is called library, spelled LBRY. So Odyssey is nothing more than a front end. So with these types of technologies, it works the same way. Now, I know the next thing you're probably going to say, like, okay, you've got all these different back-end decentralized technologies. You got LBRY, you got IPFS, you've got this, you've got that, you've got the other thing. Well, it's not helpful if all these separate networks remain separate. You can't just have this big internet with all these separate networks that don't talk. Well, the good news is there's also people working on technologies that allow these things to speak to each other and cross over and maneuver through each other. One of the more popular technologies is called libp2p. And that allows a number of different things to communicate and cross over. There's another API called Gun, which not only supports libp2p, but expands well beyond that. So these things are being developed. The technology is there. So really, it's almost like a new iteration of like what we experienced within the BBS scene. So all these concerns you mentioned, it's pretty much yes to all. Like we had our public domain BBSs, and we had our pay boards and our multi-line chat boards, and we had our various levels from completely free and open source, moving up to shareware, moving up to commercial, and even wares boards, internet piracy, all that stuff. So it's going to be the same, and it already is. You know what I mean? So it's basically just another more advanced level of that. So with full decentralization, unless they literally lock down the entire internet and say, no, there's a restricted list of protocols you can run on the entire internet, and if you don't like it, go piss up a tree. Unless they get that authoritarian, then as long as we could use the protocols that we want to use and connect, then yes, it's going to be like the BBS scene. And some networks are going to be a little more unscrupulous, and you're going to want to avoid those. And other networks are going to be good. So it's just like anything else, like was in the BBS scene. You had your bad neighborhoods in the BBS scene. Stay away from those, and you kind of had to learn your way around.
So given that you can merge the technologies with this L2TP aspect,
libp2p gun,
libp2p, sorry. Given that it being the case, there's still a concerted effort that is required by all of these well-intended decentralized networks, especially to garner behind one protocol. So the effort required, the networking required, the development of these platforms. When obviously if you just run your standard services over, your HTTP and that's all good. It's easy to do. So that is a course of education and also a change in intent by the masses, right? So my question is always this: how are you going to motivate the masses? This is the people, the mom and pops, who use Facebook and use YouTube and all the rest. The reason I don't really push my channel on library is because I can't really use it in New Zealand. There's literally not enough people using that network in New Zealand, so I can't watch content on Odyssey. It's too slow. It just jutters, so it's basically useless to me. So I mean, obviously, if I'm in Chicago, there's probably plenty of people on the library network, and therefore it's fine. So basically, what we have to do then is convince enough people to change their workflow away from these proprietary technologies or whatever you call them, into using a technology which is decentralized and is potentially ethically better. But how do you get that momentum? Very difficult to do.
Well, you get it the same way anybody else has got it with anything else. You have to understand what people are into and make things that become trendy, just like they do with cell phone apps and anything else. How do you get millions upon millions of users using some stupid game on their cell phone that might be the dumbest damn thing, most stupid, simplistic thing in the world, but you've got millions of people just playing it? Ooh, do. You have to use that level of understanding the masses and create applications that hook into these networks, and do it in such a way to where the end user is finding it convenient. Like, oh, I like this app. This is convenient. There are things about this app that I like, and that app just so happens to then be using these decentralized networking protocols, because the average consumer, the average person, is not going to really care that much whether it's decentralized or not. What they care about is the front end. Does the front end look good? Does the front end do what the end user is wanting to do in the way that they're wanting to do it? If the answer is yes, then they will use it, and that's how you make these decentralized technologies more accepted. Like, again, for example, with Odyssey and library, Odyssey, obviously for whatever reason, New Zealand is not able to take full advantage of it. But in other areas of the world, including but not limited to the United States, there is an LBRY cell phone app, for example, and people can very easily go through and use it on there. So it is available on the cell phone, and you can probably put it on a tablet, I'm sure. There is a desktop application for Linux, for Windows, for just about everything you could think of, and that's also really convenient. And the desktop application does this really cool thing where if you set it to do this, it'll download content to your drive, so that not only is it streaming from the local device, no buffering issues or anything like that, makes it more convenient. But if you're offline for any reason, let's say you're on a laptop and you're in an area where, there's no signal, there's no hotspot, whatever, but isn't it a good thing that you've got all this stuff downloaded from library already, using the app? So there's a lot of different conveniences. So really it's all about just designing things in a way that people will like. And just like back in the day, BBS scene, word of mouth. If you've got something that you can show people, hey, look how cool this is, and get people interested, same thing. Obviously, getting people to telnet to a BBS is going to take a very special niche type of person. And even BBSs with web front ends and all those bells and whistles, a regular person's going to be like, DoveNet and FidoNet, and why exactly should I care? So even that's not necessarily going to be a win. Okay, there's a web interface. So what? There's nothing on that web interface that, the average person really cares about. So to make these things more, more standard, and to get more people to care, you need to make the apps that they care about, make the web front ends that they care about, make these things do what people want done, and do it as good or better than what they're already used to using. But in the meantime, as far as at least for how it can benefit the BBS scene and the more niche groups, you could use decentralized network again for Echo Mail. Imagine connecting to an Echo Mail network just be as easy as syncing with the decentralized network, selecting what areas you want, and it all just pulls down, and you become a peer on that network. And now imagine similar for file bones. Some Echo Mail networks have file bones, and things like that. And then, of course, like you said about APIs, you could add cool stuff in there, how there's a lot of files and things on archive.org. You could even make an API that hooks into archive.org, so you could browse it and flag a file from archive.org to then transfer over to the file bone, to whatever, Echo Mail network and all that. There's so much potential within BBSs. And
I think the BBS is the aspect of the first attempt to understand something is quite high. I really do feel like the level of trying to understand, it's like trying to present somebody with the Linux command line and all they've used is Windows in the past. It's a very difficult first curve to entry. So I think a lot of things does need to change about bulletin boards if slightly more people are even going to be interested. So the aspect of Echo Mail, once you get to it, and NetMail as well, once you get to it and understand it, you have to understand all of the legacy behind it to actually be able to use it. And that's really, in this day and age, pointless. It's unnecessary. So I think that the whole aspect of FIDO and all of that should just go away, really. And this is all obviously my opinion, but I think mail should just be either replaced with standard email, and so instead of NetMail, it's email, or it runs over the SMTP network to get from BBS to BBS, right? It's maybe perhaps encrypted end to end so that we don't have to use SMTP problems. And then rather than using FIDO or something like that, we just use something a bit more user friendly. Usenet was fairly user friendly back in the day, so I would say, look, the differences between Usenet and FidoNet and all the other echoes for that matter is not the fundamental purpose behind them isn't that different, right? It's a user group message board, right? So you just need to change the way that these are accessed a little bit, and it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm suggesting, decentralization, as this type of upgrade. FidoNet can still remain FidoNet. All the other nets that are out there can still continue to exist, but start to migrate over to this more this better technology on the back end, because with that you won't need packet tossers or any of that other nonsense. The network will simply be there, boom, instant. Imagine you're a user on the BBS, and now let's say, for example, that to do this, let's say you're retrofitting BBSs that don't have this technology already. So fine, let's say a door has been made, right? So you hit M to go into the message bases, and instead of the usual message bases, it's dropping into a message-based door that can be customized and styled to look like Synchronet, Mystic, whatever. The user won't be able to really tell the difference. It'll be all the same to them. So then you're browsing these message bases, and instead of accessing it in the usual way, the BBS is just boom, it's on the decentralized network. And it's pulling these messages from network locations and boom, just providing it to the user. So the user is essentially using a text-based front-end client, which is directly accessing the decentralized network as a whole. And each BBS is then, a part of that decentralized network. So it's like, boom, instant, it's there. Boom. Instead of, toss echo mail in, toss echo mail out, timed event, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It's all...
That's exactly perhaps not with the decentralized. That's maybe something I haven't really figured out in my mind how it would work. But I see the potential for it. But I've definitely seen the fact that we could start with doors and then work into the newer BBS software, this new way of doing it, because I think NetMail especially is probably dead, or it should be, because you're still using regions and zones and all that sort of stuff. I mean, that is totally irrelevant on the days of the internet. So yeah, I think that all of that's it should eventually disappear if BBSs are to stay in any way relevant. But it need to be done overnight. But I think somebody pick that up.
I have pictured in great detail in my mind, I'm not a programmer, but I understand how the softwares work and all that. I've pictured in great detail in my mind exactly how this sort of a thing could be designed. The reason I haven't talked at length about it in such specific detail is because I'm kind of waiting for other people to take an interest. Like if I can't say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we did this, and have programmers say back to me, yeah, that would be cool. I wonder how we could do that. Then I could spill my guts at length and they'd care what I'm saying. But if I say, hey, wouldn't that be cool? And the programmer's eyes are glazing over, and then, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't care. Then why should I take the time to then, go over something that nobody's
Sure. I think there would be enough an interest, because there's a lot of people out there who actually feel pretty passionately about this. The guys particularly in Phenom Productions doors and mods, they do some really awesome work. Daniel Kelly, the guy who runs the BBS, what's it called again? I forget the name of it for some reason. Anyway, he's really good at that sort of stuff, and he made a lot of the more modern doors and mods that are really cool. So definitely get in touch with those guys if you want to do that. So anyway, I have to wrap up, I'm afraid.
Alrighty, yeah. Well, I think we've got more than enough for a part one. I mean, I was going to go into some of the modern hardware and software retrofitting of the older tech with the newer stuff that you showed about RPI on an Apple II.
What you're going to need is a few little sneaky things. First of all, this box here on your left-hand side is the Raspberry Pi. It's a modern little box. You can buy them online for about $30, $40, $50.
and you can see on the right hand side there it has an SD card, and the SD card has the Linux operating system on it. So that's called a Raspberry Pi. You also notice here we've got a RS-232 null modem cable. Probably seen those before if you've been around older computers. It's what we used to use before USB. And you see this little connector on the end here. That's a USB to RS-232 dongle. So basically that turns the RS-232 cable here, the standard analog type or standard digital type RS-232 connector, into a USB connector. And you can see that that is going from the back of this RS-232 cable into this USB cable right here onto the Raspberry Pi. And the other end of this RS-232 cable goes into the Apple II. So I've super modded this Apple II to bring it up into the future a little bit. So you can see I've got the CFFA 3000 menu, and it asks me to boot the volume which I have installed off the USB disk which I've got in the back. So I'll just boot that up, and I've got an image on here which I downloaded from that website, which you can see on the screen there, apple2.ivanx.com. But what you don't expect, I guess, is the fact that when you type on the Apple II keyboard, things start to happen. Now remember, there's no wiring here other than this USB cable, this RS-232 to USB cable that's going between the two machines. And you can see that by issuing commands on the Apple II keyboard, I can launch pretty much anything on the Raspberry Pi from the Apple IIe. And this is just because the software on the Apple II, which is running in memory, is listening to the keyboard events coming from the Apple II and issuing them straight through the USB RS-232 connection into the back of the Raspberry Pi. Pretty clever stuff. It's great for playing about with.
And like all this other cool stuff. But I guess we can talk about that in a part 2, like some other time. It doesn't need to be urgently done now.
Yeah. Oh, this old relic over here. I don't know if you can make out the XT. I've got the Apple II there and the XT over there.
That's the one you had Wolfenstein on over there.
Yeah, that's right. That's the one.
Okay, so I heard about this. James Howard on Twitter said that he had spent his Christmas holiday 22-23 making Wolfenstein 3D not only work in CGA, as you can possibly make out from this tiny little thumbnail here, but also work on an 8088 or an 8086 class machine. So if you remember, Wolfenstein 3D came out in 1992 from id Software. It worked only on a 80286 CPU or better, and only in VGA. So let's just see how this works. I mean, there's the title screen. This is very exciting for me because I've literally never seen Wolfenstein run on anything less than a VGA 286 with about, between 8 and 10 megahertz. Let's see. Oh wow, here we go. Okay, let's just see if the view is set. I'm just going to be really overzealous here and just go straight to like full size, which is probably not going to work very well. It's probably going to be a really slow frame rate, but go for the worst and then dial it back from there, I guess. Okay, let's do a new game. You can see up here it says which episode to play. Very, very, it's quite hard to see. Bring him on. I don't think I've seen that get typed screen go for ever as slow as that before. I actually did play this game when it first came out. When I was a member of the Boys Brigade, which is kind of like the Cub Scouts in the UK, and I was playing on a VGA 286 clone machine, and I mean, look, I was a kid, so, but I don't recall it going that slow. but hey, it's still brilliant that I'm playing this on an EGA. This is actually an EGA display, but there isn't an EGA version of this. It's just CGA at the moment. I have already done. Annoyingly, I've asked the author if he could possibly make an EGA version, but we'll see. Wow. And that frame rate isn't actually that bad for saying I've pretty much full screened it. It's playable. Still not hearing any sound from the Sound Blaster. But yeah, that frame rate it's not insanely bad. I'm going to see if I can switch on the sound at the PC. Can't see him. There he is. There he is. How about this then? My neighbours.
Yeah, I thought you recognized it.
That one runs a thing called by a guy called Michael Rootman, which is a whole TCP stack for MS-DOS, and he's regularly updating it. In fact, the last update was like 2nd of February or something like that. And it was to put Unicode support actually into the Telnet client, but the Telnet client allows me to connect to bulletin boards and all the rest. So I really can make a practical use out of that for doing BBS stuff. So it's really great. And then I Telnet into my Raspberry Pi as well with it. And so the things that I can do are quite limitless, really. I mean, I do my email on it. I will transfer files around networks, FTP, the whole shebang. I do quite a lot with it, so it's really cool.
Nice.
Anyway,
that can be our next conversation then.
Yeah. Oh, all right.
So, with that said, thank you for coming on. I've been wanting to do this for quite a while, but I know you've been busy. So, to everybody watching, have a really good day or night or whatever it is in your part of the world while you're watching this, and we'll see you again next time.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.